Hello, students. In our journey through the village of Palampur, we've learned that farming is the main activity. But for any farm to succeed, it needs resources. But it's not just about having things like land and water. What's really important is how these resources are shared among the people. So today, we're going to explore that critical story of resource distribution in Palampur.
So, here's our plan. First up, we'll talk about what resource distribution actually means. Then, we'll dive into the three big stories of Palampur's economy: the story of land, the story of labor, and the story of capital. After that, we'll see how all these stories connect, and finally, we'll wrap up with the key lessons.
You see, for anything to be produced, especially in farming, you need three essential things. Economists call them the factors of production: land, labor, and capital. In our discussion today, we'll look at each one and ask a very simple but very powerful question: who gets what in the village of Palampur?
Let's begin with the most fundamental resource in any farming village: the land itself. I mean, without it, nothing can grow. But is this precious resource divided fairly among all the families? Let's find out.
As we know, Palampur is home to about 450 families. Now, let's see how the most crucial resource for farming, the land, is actually divided among them. And I think the numbers might just surprise you.
Now look at this. This chart paints a very clear picture of inequality. A full 1/3 of the village, that's 150 families, are completely landless. They own nothing. The vast majority, 240 families, are small farmers with tiny plots. And then, a small handful of just 60 families own most of the large productive land. This unequal distribution has huge consequences for everyone.
In this map, this shows us what that inequality looks like in reality. Notice all the small, scattered plots of land? See how many there are? These belong to the small farmers. Now, compare that to the few, very large fields that cover most of the area. Those belong to the medium and large farmers. This is what unequal distribution looks like on the ground.
So you might be wondering, what's the problem with having a small plot of land? Well, let's take the story of Gobind to understand. He had 2.25 hectares of land. After he passed away, this land was divided among his three sons. So now each son has a plot of only 0.75 hectares. Even with better farming methods, a piece of land this small is simply not enough to support a family. And this is a very, very common problem.
Okay, now that we understand the land situation, let's move to our second factor of production: labor. After all, land doesn't farm itself, does it? It needs people to do the hard work. So who are these people, and what is their story? Let me introduce you to Dalla and Ramkali. They are farm laborers in Palampur. Because they come from landless families, they don't have another choice. They have to look for work on the farms of the medium and large landowners. Their entire livelihood depends on finding this work day by day.
Just listen to what Dalla says. He says, "It is difficult to find work these days. Only the large farmers hire us, and that too for a very limited number of days." His words, they paint a picture of great uncertainty. For families like his, work is never guaranteed, and it's certainly not available all year round.
Now look at this. This is a very stark comparison. The official minimum wage for a farm laborer, which is set by the government, is 300 rupees per day. But what does Dollar get? Only 160. That's barely half. This big gap between the official wage and the reality on the ground shows just how vulnerable these workers really are.
So this brings us to a really important question. Why would anyone agree to work for wages that are so low? Why don't they just ask for more? Let's try to understand the reasons behind this.
Well, the answer comes down to a basic economic idea: supply and demand. In Palampur, there is a huge supply of laborers. Lots of people like Dalla and Ramkali, all competing for a very limited number of jobs. And on top of that, modern machines like harvesters have reduced the need for manual labor even more. So when so many people are desperate for work, they are forced to accept lower wages. For them, some income is always better than no income at all.
All right, so we've covered land and labor. Now for our third and final factor of production: capital. You see, modern farming isn't cheap. All those high-yield seeds, fertilizers, and pesticides, they all cost money. And farmers need this money, or capital, at the beginning of every season. But who has this capital? And who can really afford to farm?
Let's try to understand this through the story of Savita. She's a small farmer. For this season, she needs 3,000 rupees to buy all the things for her farm, but she has no savings. Her only option is to borrow from Tejpal Singh, who is a large farmer. He agrees to give her the loan, but the conditions are incredibly harsh. First, an interest rate of 24% for just 4 months. And on top of that, she has to promise to work on his field during the harvest for a wage of only 100 rupees a day. This is a debt that is very, very difficult to escape from.
Now let's contrast Savita's situation with the large farmer Tejpal Singh. Because he owns so much land, he produces a huge surplus of wheat. He sells this surplus for a good profit.
And what does he do with that extra money?
Well, he saves some in the bank, he lends some to small farmers like Savita to earn even more money from the interest, and he invests in new machinery, like a tractor. His wealth just keeps on growing.
So far, we've looked at land, labor, and capital, almost like they are separate stories. But they aren't separate at all, are they? They are all deeply connected. So now let's connect these 3 dots to see the bigger picture, the pattern of inequality they create in the village.
Here is the key idea. It all begins with the unequal distribution of land. This directly leads to unequal production. Large farmers have a big surplus, while small farmers struggle just to feed their families. This, in turn, creates unequal savings and capital. And finally, all of this leads to unequal opportunities. The wealthy can invest and grow richer, while the poor are often trapped in a cycle of debt and low wages.
Now, it's very important to understand this point. We are not saying that Tejpal Singh is a bad person or that Savita is just unlucky. The problem here is not really with the individuals, but with the system itself. The unequal distribution of resources like land creates a situation where people start from very different positions in life, making it very, very difficult for those at the bottom to improve their situation. So, let us take a moment to summarize the main points we have learned today about how resources are distributed in Palampur and why this matters so much for the lives of everyone in the village.
So, what are the key takeaways from our discussion? First, the factors of production, that's land, labor, and capital, are all shared very unequally. Second, this inequality isn't just a fact. It creates a powerful cycle that tends to keep small farmers and laborers poor, while helping large farmers become even wealthier. And ultimately, this unequal distribution is what drives the entire economy of the village. We have seen how difficult farming can be for so many people in Palampur. And this brings up a new, very important question. What happens when farming just isn't enough to support a family? Well, in our next discussion, we will explore the other jobs people do, the non-farm activities in Palampur.